Hey, what's up, everybody? Jeff Jerina here, and welcome to the Men Unplugged Show. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking with Joelle Malm, who's a counselor, leadership coach, and the author of the book, Love Slows Down: How to Keep Anger and Anxiety from Ruining Life's Relationships. What we're going to be talking about today is how we can understand our anger and anxiety and really listen to what they're trying to tell us so we can process those emotions in a healthy way. And by doing so, we won't harm others, and ultimately, we're going to be able to use those emotions for our own advantage. So make sure you check out the show notes for this episode at menunplugged.net, as everything that my guests and I are going to be talking about, including the link to his book, will be there. You'll also see a link to get a copy of my new book, Cut Through the Noise, for just 99 cents. In Cut Through the Noise, you'll discover a simple 4-step system that will help you get your life back. You'll go from maxed out, stressed out, and just plain wore out to a life of joy, peace, and freedom. Now, before we dive into our conversation today, I want to let you know that I just finished recording the audiobook for Faith Without Fear. If you haven't had time to read the paperback or even the ebook version, or you'd rather just listen to it while you're driving or mowing the yard, you can download your copy today at faithwithoutfearbook.com. Again, that's faithwithoutfearbook.com. Now, to get your pre-order copy of Cut Through the Noise, go to menunplugged.net/noise. That's NOISE. All right, let's cue the intro. So the big question is this: how do we as warriors of Jesus Christ, men of God who want to stay battle ready, who want to honor the Lord, and who want to grow in our daily walk, unplug from those things that weigh us down so we can ignite our faith, strengthen our family, and ultimately succeed in every aspect of life? That is the question, and this show will give you the answers. My name is Jeff Jerina, and welcome to Men Unplugged. All right, let's meet today's featured guest, Joelle Malm. Joelle, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, I am super excited to be with you. I'm really grateful that you invited me on the show.
All right, so take a minute to say hello to the Men Unplugged community and something interesting about yourself that most people don't know.
Okay. Wow, something interesting about myself. So my name is Joelle Malm. I lead outdoor expeditions around the world, have a master's degree in counseling, been married for about 13 years now. I got a daughter, and something interesting about me is I love cooking. In fact, my wife actually doesn't really like cooking, so it works out quite well because I love to cook and she loves to eat what I make. So
that's a good trade-off. Now, you got to tell me here, since you said that, what's your favorite meal or your dish to make?
Oh man, I love Vietnamese food.
I've never had that. I've never actually had that.
What? Yeah.
No.
So I bought a couple years back, I bought a really high power wok. So I realized I would cook when I walk and I just couldn't get the flavors I wanted. And I discovered, a guy told me one time, he's like, the only way you get the real flavors is you got to cook at 500 degrees.
Oh, wow.
So I bought a huge burner. You can't even use it inside because it's too hot. It's like boiling crawfish or shrimp or something. I take it outside and I just sear it. And as soon as that oil hits the pan and lights on fire, you know it's hot enough.
Okay, Men Unplugged. Hey, on that note, we're going to really light the fire here to what we're talking about in this episode. And I'm psyched to have you on the program today. I really am, Joelle, because we're going to hammer out this issue of anger, especially now that most men and women are spending a lot more time working in their homes in close proximity to their spouse, their children, as opposed to getting that break that, I can't believe I'm going to say this here, traveling to work on a daily basis. Is that crazy that I just said that?
No, it's reality. And it's the reality a lot of us are facing right now. And you're going, why is everything so hard right now? Well, there's no space.
Right. It's like, get out of my face, please. Right? That's how we have to say it now.
In Jesus' name.
Exactly. It's like that deal, when you're at work and you pass out, you fall asleep at your desk and the computer screensaver goes on and your boss comes in and he nudges you and you're like, oh, in Jesus' name, amen. And the boss is like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So let's dive in today's discussion because I really want to get some practical solutions to manage our anger. And so with that said, Joelle, are you ready to recharge?
Oh yeah, let's do this.
All right, great. So let's start with the title of your book, Love Slows Down: how to keep anger and anxiety from ruining life's relationships. So expand on that first phrase, love slows down, because I agree with you, Joelle, that if you're angry, you're anxious, love's going to, I guess, kind of take a back seat. But expand on that a little bit deeper for me.
Yeah, so the title of the first chapter is Love Slows Down, Anger Speeds Up. And if you've ever experienced anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, you know what that's like. With your kids, you're just kind of like, get in the car, just get in the car. Right? Or whatever it is, or somebody at work that's just not producing what you need them to produce. And you're just like, come on. And you're just trying to speed things up. And so love slows down, anger speeds up. And the essence of the book is that there's three basic things we're all looking for. And when we get threatened in one of those areas, anger always comes from a threat to one of those three areas or several of those areas. And what we do is we go as fast as we can. It's either the fight or the flight, to fight the thing that's threatening us or to run away from the thing that's threatening us. And the response that usually promises to regain kind of an equilibrium, especially for men, is anger. But anger is always a secondary emotion. Anger comes after another emotion, which is was a revelation to me when I realized that for the first time. Because as a guy, my default is I go to anger. And I remember sitting with somebody one time and the counselor said, no, there was something you felt right before it. I'm like, nah, I just felt angry. Nope, right before it, there was another emotion. And I had to explore what that emotion was. And it always comes down to a threat to one of those three basic things, which the three things are a threat to your security. That may be your financial, your physical, your personal security, your emotional security, or a threat to your connection with others, which is your relationship with others, feeling valued, feeling recognized, esteemed and seen, or a threat to your control. And control is my sensitive one. So anything that threatens my ability to have free movement, my own choices, make my own decisions, my own empowerment, it always makes me angry. So traffic, unfortunately, is one of those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it threatens my control.
Right. So here's the thing. So your response right there, you actually were leading into two of my questions, and this is good stuff because this means we're tracking on the same page. But I want us to hold off here just a second on the security, connection, and control, and go back here just a second. We're saying that love slows down. Okay. In a way, love is kind of pushed aside, right? Because the other emotions we think are more important at that time. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so the essence of it is, and this sounds super ethereal, but it's really true. We were created from God's love. We were created for God's love, and we are called to return to God's love. And the only way we're going to get the security, connection, and control we want is in God's love. And what happened is, as soon as sin entered the world, we were, of course, separated by our sin from God's perfect love. And you notice the first thing Adam and Eve felt was fear. It's fear. They felt the threat. All of a sudden, they realized, oh my goodness, that the things we need that we're made for, security, connection, control, we've been separated from the source of that. They just instinctively knew it. And they started getting afraid. So that's that the love comes down. When we want to return to God's love, the love we are made from, made for, and are called to return to, the answer, again, it sounds so ethereal, but the answer is always to slow down what you're doing, stop, release the anger, and let it point you back to the only thing that's going to fulfill your security, connection, or control. Your spouse can never do it. Your great marriage can never do it. Your job can never do it. What you own, who you know, what you have can never do it. The only thing that's going to bring fulfillment is God's love. And you get there by slowing down and going back to that love.
I like that response. So you basically said those three things were made from God's love, made for love, and made to return to that love.
Exactly.
I really like that. I really do. So let's kind of hammer in on that here, because when you were sharing that, the verse popped in my head. 1 John 4:18, it says, and I know you know the verse, there's no fear in love, for perfect love cast out all fear. And we know that perfect love is Jesus Christ.
Yes.
That's it. Okay.
Yep.
So explain to me here, kind of break down here in a practical sense. Maybe give me a 1 to 2 minute version of what you mean by security, connection, and control. Something that the listener can really grab onto and say, yeah, I can understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example. So I talked about this concept at a men's event. Had a guy come up to me, well-dressed dude. You could tell he was a successful man in life. Came to me and he said, hey, I don't know if I agree with you that all my anger comes down to one of those threats to one of those three things. And I was like, well, then what made you angry last time? And he's like, oh, I got this unexpected veterinary bill. I was like, well, how much was it?
Yeah, make me mad.
Yeah, he's like, it was like $400 and something. And I was like, and that made you really angry? He said, yeah. I said, well, which of those three do you think you're most probably sensitive to? The security, the connection, the control. He's like, oh, security. He said, I grew up in poverty in Asia. And he's like, I've made a successful business. I'm doing well. He's like, but I'm always afraid of not having what we need. And I was like, so would it be fair to say that bill threatened security and it caught you off guard? And he said, oh yeah. And all of a sudden he kind of had the realization, it is true. And he said, whenever I get angry, you're right. It always has to do with something threatening my financial security. So that's example. For me, it's control. I'm a control guy.
Me too. We're gonna have to wrestle out who's controlling this interview now. I'm interviewing you, so
back off, man.
Exactly.
So for me, like traffic, it always gets me. And I don't feel unsafe when I'm driving 7 miles an hour because we're driving very slow, right? In traffic.
But you're upset that you're not going faster. That's how I am.
Which, let me bring up something really quick. This is really important because I know a lot of people say, oh, I don't really get angry. And here's what we've found through the research. I've worked with a psychiatrist in the Bahamas on this.
Tough gig, man. I'm so sorry.
Somebody got to do it, brother. So he talks about how those who are sensitive in the connection corner, they don't like to call it anger. They prefer to call it frustration because they've seen anger do damage to connection to others. So they would say, oh, I don't really get angry, but they get frustrated. So a lot of times what I say to guys, and when we're doing this interview, I just say, if you say, well, I don't really get angry, but what gets you frustrated or irritated? Then that's usually a sign to me. If somebody says I don't get angry, I'm usually like, oh, as a counselor, I hear that. I listen for what people are saying. And I'm like, hey, you're a connection person probably. So those things, that's an element. And if you're saying it gets, for example, in traffic, I get angry. My wife is like, she's a connection person, right? So the traffic doesn't bother her. She just turns on music or whatever. But what really upsets her is my reaction to the traffic. So she'll be like, if you don't calm down, I'm going to get out of this car and walk home. This is a good time for us to be spending quality time together, and you're acting like a crazy maniac. So her threat isn't the traffic. Her threat is my crazy reaction to the traffic. So you see how the same situation can create anger in different people for different reasons based on which corner they're sensitive to, that security, the connection, or the control.
Right. And your response at that time now with COVID is, well, maybe you should. Maybe one of us should. We can catch a break from one another, right? No, I'm just joking. You wouldn't say that. At least not on air you wouldn't, right?
No, never.
So I want to move on to something here that you said in your book, that if we understand our anger and anxiety and we listen to what they're telling us, what they're trying to tell us, and process it in a healthy way, then we can use it in our own advantage. Now, I'm sitting here questioning that because I'm like, what are you talking about?
I know, it's crazy, right? How could you use anxiety and anger? Well, here's the thing. If the goal of life is really to surrender to God's love, and let his love flow through you, the best thing you can do is eliminate anything that is causing you to seek your security, connection, or control rather than seek his kingdom and his righteousness. So what anger does, anger and anxiety, and the book, front of the book has a big old yellow and orange and white cone.
Yeah, it's cool. I like that cover. I really do.
Anger and anxiety are just as, you see a cone, you know something, you need to slow down here. You slow down, you go, oh, obviously I'm trying to get my security, connection, or control from something that's not going to bring fulfillment. And you realize, oh, there's another area I need to surrender to the Lord. So for me, whenever something's threatening, for example, let's talk about COVID. COVID is a threat to all these things, man. And that's why there's so much fear, which fear always leads to anger. That's the biblical sequence. You see fear in Genesis 3, and as soon as Genesis 4 pops up with Cain and Abel, anger shows up. That's always the sequence. Man, COVID's a threat to all those. Our financial security, our own health and security. It's a threat to our connection with others. We're having to be separated from each other. And for extroverts, that's like brutal. It's really hard. And then you have the additional out of the control, like, people telling, some people are real upset about the mask thing. You're not going to tell me I got to wear a mask, right? Nobody's going to tell me what to do.
And it's hard to breathe through. Let's be honest.
It's the truth. Yes. So you've got all these threats happening right now. And I mean, it's a very real thing. And the challenge we have to recognize is if the real goal of life is to return to walking in God's love and letting that love flow through us. A.W. Tozer says, the essence of surrender is getting out of God's way so that he can do in us what he wants to do through us. And if you really want to surrender to God and his love and his work and what he wants to do, which is the process of sanctification, you got to get rid of those seeking security, connection, and control from anywhere other than the true source, which is God's love.
Yeah, I like that. And when you said that, and kind of back me up on this if you can, or, maybe you don't agree with me on this, but I'm thinking that COVID is just a title. Now, obviously this is a real thing. This is a real pandemic. I'm not saying that, but to me, it could be anything, because what it really is we're looking at something that we're uncertain. We're unclear about it. That's the bigger thing, is we don't know what's going on, right? We know there's some solution, but yet there's still this uncertainty about the coronavirus. And I think maybe, I don't know what you're saying here, but to me, that's the bigger thing, right? It's the uncertainty, and that's how the anger, the anxiety comes about.
Yeah, it's a threat. Threats always create uncertainty, because the thing we think we've got our hands around and we've got under our, again, I'm talking from my control framework. I'm all about control. The thing we think we've got our handle around, our mind around how things work, all of a sudden is thrown up in the air. Everything is uncertain. And we're created, we want to understand. You think about the first thing that Satan did to deceive us is he's like, hey, let me help you understand why God said not to eat from the fruit.
Right.
No, it was a bad explanation, but we want to understand. And a lot of times we're in our effort to understand, we come up with bad explanations or whatever. And it's usually based on our own fear of what's going to come upon us. So it drives us back to, again, those three threats, and the three threats create the uncertainty of, what if I don't get this? What if we don't have security anymore? What if we don't have the connection with it? What if we can never meet again in small groups like this? What if it always, and there's just a fear and uncertainty. And when there's no end in sight, oh my goodness, the effect it has. And we see that with so many marriages falling apart right now. It seems like there's no end in sight. There is going to be an end to this. This too shall pass. But man, when you don't see an end in sight and it just looks like there's no way out of this, man, it can create tons of anxiety and anger.
Yeah, and I think that just brings in that old cliche, that old acronym. Fear is false expectations appearing real.
Yes.
That is the big thing. And, I'm going to just agree with you here on control, man. I struggle with that myself. And, it's times that when I'm broken down and leaning on the Lord, that I realize I have this illusion of control.
Yeah.
That I think I'm really in control, and we're not. We may be able to manage something for a little bit, but we're not really controlling the situation. If we're controlling it, we're holding it like we're closing our fist like a vice grip, and we can't let anything else in. And then when things get out of whack, then we get fearful. We get anger. So talk about the connection there, Joelle, between fear and anger. I know you highlight a little bit, but kind of go a little bit deeper for me.
Yeah. So again, anger is always a secondary emotion, and the sequence we always see, and the biblical sequence, the first emotion Adam and Eve experience when they're separated from the perfect love is fear. God says, "Hey, Adam, where are you?" He says, "I realized I was naked and I got afraid." And then God said, "Well, who told you were naked?" It was the instinctive, the emptiness he felt when he was separated from the perfect love. Now, here's the thing, of course. Jesus came. He paid the price for our rebellion against God. He reconnected us to that love. And now our job is to, what Jesus says in Matthew 6:33, he says, guys, I know you're worried about what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink, what you're going to wear, essentially the security, the connection, control element. But I'm telling you this, is the way you're going to get what you really want is to not seek security, connection, and control. The way you're going to get it is to seek my kingdom first and my righteousness. And then all those things you're looking for, they're going to come to you. So what happens is, whenever we feel a threat to our security, connection, and control, our natural response is, how do we get back to the place where we feel like we have our security, connection, and control again? And, the natural kind of flesh-based tendency is to, how do you regain it yourself? Instead of trusting the Lord with all your heart and leaning, you'd start to lean on your own understanding of what's it going to take for me to do this? And that's how it starts to ruin relationships. When you get afraid, I had talked to a guy recently, and his second marriage was falling apart. And I said, man, what's going on? He said, well, I started kind of digging a little deeper, and he realized that through our conversation that he had been making a lot of fear-based decisions because he was terrified of being divorced again. So one of the things he did is he's like, we're keeping all of our finances separate. We're keeping the house half, 50-50 divided. Like everything was separated.
Wow.
So that if another divorce happened, the thing that devastated him the previous time, if it happened again, it wouldn't be as messy. But of course, that creates fear in his new wife.
Right.
And they're just getting increasingly angry because she feels him protecting his assets over here, and and he's doing it all in the name of this will make it easier if it falls apart, and we won't be hurt as bad as I was hurt last time. But he doesn't realize subconsciously what it's done to the marriage. And if fear always leads to more fear, courage is contagious, and so is fear. And so fear,
and you can't have both at the same time.
You cannot, no. And so he feels the fear. He's doing it in the name of common sense and practicality. This is the best way to do it because last time it was so messy, right? But here his marriage is falling apart. He's afraid. He's angry. He's like, why does this keep happening to me? And he had subconsciously been creating the very environment through fear-based decisions that made the thing he feared the most come upon him.
Wow. Now you mentioned you struggled with this, with anger growing up.
Oh yeah.
And it kind of had some negative effects. And what I want to know is talk about that for maybe 30 to 60 seconds. But really, to me, what's the bigger thing is, what was it? What was the turning point to help you to overcome it, or at least manage it in a healthy way?
The turning point for me was I had just gotten out of college, and I was traveling around the world, and I had this kind of moment where I got really mad at my mother for something, and somebody turned to me, and this counselor I was talking to, she said, well, what did you feel when your mom did that? The classic counselor question.
Right.
I was like, I felt angry. She was like, no, but what did you feel right before that? Anger is a secondary emotion.
And that's hard to think that far ahead, because you're like, no, I was angry. That was the emotion.
That's why in the book, one of the things that I felt was so important, is to include a list of words on page 25. I include a list of words to help guys who are like, I don't know what I felt before. Well, here's some ways that anger or fear shows up and turns into anger. I felt abandoned, vulnerable, threatened, invalidated, rejected, helpless, ignored, belittled, weak. Felt that fear of those things or hurt in that area, and then it led to anger. And I realized with me, what always got me, every time that got me is when I felt embarrassed. Embarrassment always led to my anger. And I discovered that embarrassment is usually connected to control. And all of a sudden it was this epiphany to me. I'm like, I have been a very angry person most of my life, and it's always related to my fear of being embarrassed. And that was when God started to liberate me, and I kind of started to dig up some stuff I'd been ignoring from past stuff. And I didn't have super trauma from childhood or anything, but we've all got some issues from stuff. Our parents have their own issues. They pass those on to us unknowingly. And so I had to start digging for that, and ended up making me want to go get a master's degree in counseling. Got the master's degree in counseling, and
everything was all better.
Oh yeah, that solved it all. But I started talking to a lot of guys who just realized, man, my anger is really messing up things. And it promises authority and power in the moment, but in the end, you're like, oh, why did I do that again?
Right. So what turned it over for you was getting that to find out what was that emotion before you got angry.
Yeah. Whenever you get angry at something happening to you, it's always because of something happening inside of you.
Now, let me ask you this though, before we take our quick break here. I got to ask you this. You got to answer this one though, because the question that I'm having, I'm sure a lot of listeners have right now is, yeah, but when I get angry, it's hard to stop and think in that moment, what is it that's getting me so mad? Like, what is a practical thing that they can do?
Yeah. So the practical thing you can do is slow down. So you've got to step away. And the first half of the book is all full of practical, like the practical stuff to deal with just responses to anger. You've got to slow down and you've got to step away, because here's the thing, Jeff, when you get angry, there's actually proof that the brain activity shifts from the prefrontal cortex. That's the rational part of your brain that makes the good decisions, to the crazy cortex, which is kind of the fight or flight primal part of your brain. You can't think rationally. So that's why we just explode. So you got to step away and you say, hey, I can't deal with this right now. I can't address this right now because I'm going to do something I regret. And then you go and you calm yourself down. It may be physical exercise you need to do. Unfortunately, a lot of guys turn to the bottle or the drug or whatever, and that's not a healthy way to do it. That's just pushing it down, kicking the can down the road. You've got to calm down and then be able to rationally explain, here's what I felt before I got angry. Because nobody can do anything with, you made me so angry. Well, okay, what do I do about it? Don't do that again. Well,
it's that simple, right?
And how many people are rarely is someone intentionally trying to make you angry, especially your spouse. Man, your spouse is a person of goodwill. If they weren't, they wouldn't still be with you.
Right.
So you've got to assume the best. And one of the things I talk about is in the book is you've got to go in like a cat, like a paranoid cat. You can turn into a lion later if you need to, but a paranoid cat goes in like kind of very tiptoeing in, looking at the situation. But most of the time we roar in like a lion, like roar, and we don't maybe know all the facts. We go yelling at our kids or yelling at our spouse, yelling at our coworkers. And then we realize later, oh, there's a really important detail I didn't know.
Right.
And so you can go in but it all comes back to you've got to slow down because love slows down, but anger always speeds up.
Man, I love that. And when you first responded to that question, you said, Jeff, I was like, man, he's talking to me like I did something wrong. Like you were really counseling me there. That's what I felt like. I was like, I better listen up here. I was starting to take notes. But, the other thing to add to what Joelle was saying was, a lot of times what I've found for myself, and I'm not saying I do this all the time because I get things wrong all the time. In fact, multiple times a day. But I've learned kind of if I get mad at something, I have to do something to change my state at that moment. Maybe it's take a break. Maybe you pinch yourself. Maybe you got a rubber band or something that you're popping yourself, your wrist, something to get you to get out of that mindset that you're in. So you can just take those, 5, 10, 15 seconds to pause, like the cone on your book, slow down and rethink what's really going on. So this is good stuff. If you want to keep the fire going here, we're going to keep it going here, guys, with Joelle Malm, but we're going to take a quick break and when we come back, we're going to keep this thing firing up. Do you need a new website for your business or church? How about a hosting platform that keeps your website up and running at turbo speed while taking care of all the technical headaches? Maybe you're looking to expand your small business or company presence online with proven SEO, logo design, or podcast coaching. If so, visit sitespartan.com and get started today. That's SITESPARTAN.com. And when you use promo code MenUnplugged by October 15th, you'll get $100 off web design. All right, I'm back here with Joelle Malm, and I'm telling you what, you're firing on all cylinders here. And for me personally, this is something that, I feel like when I get angry, I feel like I'm calm, reserved, but there are moments that, man, I can get mad to where I'm like, okay, I'm going to send this email out to this person, this company, because they're going to hear it from me. And this is not fair how they're treating me. I don't like to see this bill, this water bill. This is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And the next thing I know, I'm like, wait a second, these people are not out to get me. This is just stuff that happens. And my wife will go, why are you being like that? I'm like, well, this is a lot of money. She's like, Jeff, in the end, does it really matter? I'm like, I guess it doesn't. It's like, I don't really want to say that. I'm not agreeing with her, but I'm like, okay, if it means that we're going to have a good dinner, then okay. I see what you're saying, right? So you're speaking to me here because this is real life stuff. This is stuff that we all deal with, Men Unplugged. And I hope that you're encouraged and equipped by what Joelle's sharing here, because I think if we really applied it, then we could help ourselves and help others out just a little bit every single day. So we're going to shift gears here just a second, because every episode on the Men Unplugged show, to me, I think one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, is that every guest needs to share how they came to know Jesus Christ. So with that said, Joelle, can you share your probably 1 to 2 minute personal testimony?
Yes, I can. So my dad, I've been a pastor's kid, missionary kid my whole life. And I was born, I always tell people I was born on the front row of a church. Wasn't really, but I was there within the first few days of being born. And grew up in church, And man, I had an exceptional father. I know a lot of guys whose dads were in ministry, they feel like they got put second. But my dad did not do that. My dad put us first. Even when we moved to the mission field in Guatemala when I was right when middle school was starting. And even then, there's so much need where we grew up, but my dad always put his family first. And so many missionary kids even that I saw ran from God because they just saw there was these values that were, God took my dad from me or whatever. Did not see that. In fact, I feel like my dad, I would not be the man I am today apart from both my parents' example of courage, wisdom. And in fact, we built our whole podcast around that. It's just me talking to dad about stuff he did right growing up. And people were like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, it's a weird thing that you can do that. But I learned so much from my father. And he's just, and of course I'm growing in the Lord. And it's just been fun now that I'm in my 40s, talking to dad about the things I learned from him and him going, I didn't realize I even taught you that. But it was just him living his godly life and me watching that. Because more is caught than taught.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you're like, my kids won't listen to me. Yeah, that's because they're too busy watching you. So
that's big.
That's my story. Yeah.
Man, I like that. And hey, you must have done something right. You've got 50 episodes now, right? So are you going to keep going, or is he just done 50 and you're stopping?
No, we're going to keep going because I'll keep remembering stories. We'll start with a story from my childhood, like the time I punched a girl in the face right in front of the whole church and him having to respond.
Oh,
I was a kid.
Oh, whoa, that's not good.
Yeah.
That's not good. Did she punch you back though? Did she punch you back?
No. But man, dad was in an awkward position when the father of the girl brought her in front of this whole church at this Easter picnic we're having and goes, what are you going to do about your kid? And then, so we talk in one of the episodes about that. And,
that's hilarious, man. That's not funny that you did that, but it's hilarious the situation your dad was put in. Yes, man, I hope you've learned your lesson, man.
Oh yeah. I haven't done that for about 35 years.
And never will again. Never will again. So on that note here, because you must have been angry at that time.
I was a tiny kid, yeah.
Yeah, you must have been. But you mentioned there's 7 types of subtle anger that have a tendency to sneak up on us and unfortunately harm those we love. So give us a sneak peek of what those 7 types of subtle anger are. Yeah,
so there's the scorekeeper. That's what I call it in the book. They keep the score. And they don't say anything when the little thing happens. They just kind of brush it off. And you're like, oh, they let it go. But then 10 years later, they bring up the thing that happened on the honeymoon or whatever. And you're like, okay, clearly you have not let that go. Right. And that's one of them. There's the slow building volcano. These are the people that they only get really angry about once every 5 or 6 years, maybe. And it's an explosion. And everyone is just reeling from the fear of what the massive explosion. Of course, they let off all the steam. They feel better about it. And they're like, I'm not an angry person. But just because you've let it build for 6 years doesn't mean you're an angry person. You're not an angry person, right? And everybody around, you feel great now. You're like, hey, let's go out for pizza. And everybody's cowering in the corner like, oh my gosh, what just happened to dad, right? So then there's the candy-coated razor remark, which is the person that they say the meanest things in the sweetest way.
I don't like that one.
I never forget, I preached a series of sermons at this church for about a month. And the last sermon, a lady came up to me. She's like, your sermons have been getting better along the way. You're actually using the Bible now. And I was like, and then she smiled and walked away. And I was like, woo.
You're not coming back to that church.
Yeah, I was like, that lady was making a very clear point in the gentlest, most razor sharp way. Then there's the folks that shut down. They just shut down.
Right. Passive aggressive.
Yeah. Or there is passive aggression in addition to this. These are the people just literally, they give you nothing.
Okay.
They just shut down. They won't talk to you for days or weeks. And they use that silence as a power trip. Right. And I'm not angry. And they'll say things like, well, I just don't want to say something I regret. No, you're using silence as your anger tool. Right. There's ganging up. The gang fighter is the person that when they get around their friends, I've seen this with couples a lot. Couples will be having trouble and the wife will start mentioning things her husband does to embarrass him in front of the group because the group and everybody laughs. But when they get home, you're like, that's not going to go well. He's going to be upset.
Right.
But she lashed out with her anger because she felt security around a group of people to say these kind of negative things. Now, people
do that a lot on social media too, right?
They do.
Okay.
They do. You're very much on the same page. You get it. And then there's passive aggression. They agree with you to your face and then go do the complete opposite, right? And then there's sarcasm, yes, is a form of anger. But sarcasm is safe. You can say something sarcastic and then people are like, dude, what's your problem? You're like, oh, can't you handle a joke? I was just joking.
Right.
No, there's some anger behind it. So
those are good. Those really are. So I want to dig down deeper into some real life examples, because not like we're not already. I mean, man, you're giving some really good stuff here, but actual situations that men and women, that we encounter on a daily basis. So I want you to talk about here one of the ones that a lot of listeners here would have to deal with. Probably most every listener here deals with on at least a daily basis. Well, before COVID, they were going to work every day. Now
Right.
maybe it's, speaking with a customer on the phone or through Zoom or, an employee or a boss. But how do you deal with the situation with individuals in the workplace where you get angry? What are some tips that you can offer?
Yeah. So one of the most important things you've got to recognize is this: all of life is connected. And we'd like to think as men, we can put home in a box and then go to work and pull out that box and work on that and then put work in a box and then go back home. But right now it's like spaghetti, man. It's all been thrown together and there's just no way to get around it. So maybe you're working from home trying to do it and you've just had your kid interrupt you for the 300th time today and you're about to get on a call and you're already at your wit's end. And then somebody on the other end is like, well, I don't understand what you want. And you're just like, I'm about to lose it, man. Like, what is wrong with this person?
Yeah.
You're like, it's as clear as day what I want. But what's happening is you've taken the anger from over here, the situation with your child, and you're bringing it with you. And we, as guys, we like to think we can compartmentalize, but you can only compartmentalize to a certain level.
Right.
And at this point in life, because so much has been crammed together because of the COVID situation, you just got to recognize that. And you need to know you got to know what consistently makes you angry, which is why that framework of security, connection, control is so helpful, because you can start to watch out for those situations that consistently make you angry. So for example, for me, when I go to a doctor's appointment, I don't understand why doctors book multiple appointments at the same time, and then they tell you to show up 10 minutes early so that you can wait for another 45 minutes to see them.
What's up with that?
Oh, dude, that sets me off. And I literally, up until recently, I haven't been able to go to a doctor's office and stay calm because I know, and I know it's coming. I know they're going to do it to me. And then they always shock me with how inept it is again.
Maybe what they're doing, I just figured it out. They're seeing if you have hypertension.
Maybe they're creating hypertension. But if you know what the patterns to what triggers it, it's going to help you. So one of the things I talk to guys a lot is guys, August and September, bad months for anger. In fact, hospital check-ins at mental hospitals go up like spades in August and at the end of summer. And there's two reasons for it, right? One is, and it's going to be worse this year, unfortunately, because of COVID.
Yeah.
One is because of heat. Okay. We live in Texas, so summer is like the 9th level of hell, right?
Yeah. I like that. It's true. It is true.
And there's studies that show that up to the mid 80s, like violence and anger increase in people as heat rises.
Yeah.
Up in the 80s, mid 80s, it probably gets so hot you just don't have any energy to getting angrier. But you've got August, September, you've got that combined with September is the time that all the bills are coming due for your kids' school stuff. You get this additional bill from the school for parent connection fee. And you're like, what the heck is a parent connection fee? And why do I have to pay $700 for it, right?
I don't want to connect with any other parents then for $700.
Yeah, that's right. And why don't you just include it in the bill you sent me earlier, right? So you're getting nickel and dime. You have high electric bills if you live in the South. You have high, basically everything bills. So there's bills combined with the heat, and combined with this year, you've been working from home. You haven't gotten any space. Your kids have been home since March? And you're like, oh my gosh, we've got to get these kids out of here at this point. And then you're
tripping me out, man. I'm having a tough time.
And then the schools are like, oh, and by the way, we aren't going to have your kids back until October. And you're like, oh no, we can't do this anymore. So that's where we're at as a society.
Why am I paying taxes then for 12 months? You need to give me a prorated amount.
You sound like a control fellow there, Jeff.
No, I'm not. I'm not angry. What's my emotion before that? Disgust. That's it.
Yeah. So that all that's adding up right now. And it's so important for us to recognize that. And if you recognize the patterns to your anger, you can avoid it. So like for me with the doctor's office, I've just learned I'm going to take an audiobook, I'm going to take my computer, and I'm just going to work from the doctor's office because I'm probably going to be there all afternoon and night.
Right, exactly. That's a good point.
When I go into traffic, my wife, she always has to give me a pep talk. She'll like, it sounds goofy, but she'll kind of put her hand on both shoulders, look me in the face. She'll be like, Joelle, it's 5:00. There's going to be traffic. We're going to get where we need to go. It's going to be slower than you want. Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. And
brake.
That's true. And just that simple, it's ridiculous, but I have to remind myself, oh yes, I'm going into a situation that's prone to make me angry. Because there's always patterns to it. One of the things I talk about in the book is keep track for about a week or two of the things that consistently make you angry, and you're going to see it's almost always related to the same corner, either security, connection, or control. And when you get into those situations, if you know you're going to be around that one employee or coworker that just, every time you get around them, you're just like, I want to slap them. You just figure out how are you going to, first of all, maybe minimize contact, or how are you going to mentally prepare for when that person says or does that thing, and just go in prepared, because there's always a pattern to it. Does that help kind of answer that question?
Yeah, when you were saying that, I'm going to hit you up here with another question here, because when you talked about patterns, there's a question that just entered my mind, and here's the question. Well, are we put in the same situation? Does God put us in the same situations because he wants to teach us something or so we can learn something? Or is it just that's what's happening and we haven't figured out how to navigate through that situation?
I think it's a little of both. I think some of it's just that threat we feel. And then some of it's like, oh, and by the way, since you keep looking for that thing you're looking for somewhere else, I'm just going to let things into your life that keep drawing you back to me.
Yeah, and I ask that because there's situations I still deal with that my wife, and she has all intentions that are good. She'll say, I think the Lord keeps bringing this type of situation, because you haven't figured out how to deal with it. And I'm like, no. I'm like, I don't agree with that. Those things, they just happen. He said, no, God wants to teach you something. You have to be able to let him teach you. And I'm like, oh man, then I swallow real hard and go, yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. Hey, you got a wise wife, man.
Doesn't mean I listen all the time. Doesn't mean I listen. But you see my point here is that we all have these things, and we'll ask our friends, our family members, why does this keep happening? Why keep having this situation? And when you hear that from somebody, at first off, it does make you a little upset.
Yeah.
So
who wants to surrender?
No, I don't like that. So I know you talked about how to deal with stuff at work, and we kind of highlighted here some other areas, but be more specific here to the man that's listening right now that's married. How can he control his anger towards his spouse? And then I think equally important is how can he manage or diffuse a situation when his wife is angry at him?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing you have to recognize is, listen, you're going to have to express your anger, okay? If you just bottle it up, it's going to come out some way. And it may come out in really like immoral behavior. It may come out in addictions. Those things they're being built up within you, you've got to express them. And I talk to good Christian guys all the time. They're like, well, Jesus has healed me of my anger and I don't have it anymore. But yet I know that they're struggling with addictions or things. And what they're doing is they're projecting all of that energy that needs to be expressed in a healthy way into something very unhealthy in the name of, well, I'm not going to say anything destructive. But here's the thing: you can express your anger in a healthy way and still be a very godly person. And don't like get this right. There is righteous anger. Okay, Jesus showed perfectly righteous anger. It's rare. Righteous anger is very rare, but it's real. And the anger of man does not accomplish the righteousness of God is one of the verses that I quote a lot. What I'm talking about here is the anger of man, and like anger of humanity in terms of man. But you've got to recognize that you have to express it, and you can express. But when you express it in a healthy way, that's a good thing. But when you do it unhealthy, it's going to lead to all these negative behaviors. And guys, we've got all sorts of ways to express it in unhealthy ways. There's rage, but then there's also redirecting it into pornography.
Right.
There's a lot of guys that they don't get angry, no, but they're involved in pornography and it's these negative emotions that build up. So you've got to learn to express them. For those who are in touch with their anger, like it's explosive and it's very clear. I think the first thing you've got to do is you've got to recognize, again, when you get angry, you're not thinking straight. The second thing you've got to do is step away because you're not thinking straight. You do not need to be having a conversation. And here's the thing: when you are in a marriage, a relationship with somebody who's getting angry, you've got to recognize this too. They're not thinking straight. So it's not a time to rationally think with them. Like, let's rationally think about what's going on. No, you need to give them some space, and you need to create the space. They need to have space, and you've just got to give it time. Wait, now, as if you're angry, you need to give your spouse, I'm talking for men here, say, hey, listen, I want to talk about this, but let's wait till after we get the dishes put away, or after we put the kids to bed. Give a time frame so it doesn't just seem like you're doing that passive form of like ignoring it, because I've found that there's usually one spouse that wants to aggressively fix it, the other one wants to pull away from it.
Right.
So give a time frame. Let's talk about this after the kids are put to bed, or let's talk about this, whenever the time is that works. Again, it's best to not let the sun go down on your anger. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to stay up every night until 2 or 3 in the morning, arguing about what made you angry, but you do need to acknowledge what it was, and then you need to choose to let it go every night. But you've got to express it. You've got to do it in a healthy way. And here's the most important thing in marriages. You've got to assume the other person is a person of goodwill. Because if you don't, you're just going to think everything they're doing is out to make you angry. And most of the time, they don't even know what they did that made you angry. That's what I've seen over and over again. And we're all furious. They know what they did. No, they probably don't. Now, marriages can get to a point where, yes, you're antagonizing the person, but most of the time people aren't intentionally trying to make you angry. They're too focused on themselves to be making you angry.
No, that's a good point. And what you said right there is to realize that the other individual is really a good person and they're not trying to do this out of ill will. I think that is so key right there, because when we get mad or we're in that situation where someone's mad at us, we can think, why are you attacking me? What is going on here? You start getting defensive. Yeah. And, you mentioned about coming up with a time that they want to do that. And if somebody's real aggressive and wants the situation resolved, I got to ask you this, though. What if that other individual doesn't agree to this timeout, this other time to talk? What do you do then?
Yeah, you're going to have to negotiate some space. And that's part of marriage, is negotiating, saying, listen, you've got to understand, I'm so mad right now that I'm going to do something dangerous. And or destructive and hurtful. And I really don't want to do that. Again, that's hard because that takes a level of slowing down in itself, where it's like to even be able to express that. Because sometimes you're just like, I just want to scream or punch the wall or something.
Right.
So it takes this, and again, it comes back to the self-knowledge. One of the quotes that I love in the book by Thomas à Kempis, a humble knowledge of thyself is a surer way to God than a deep search after learning.
That's good.
You've got to recognize when the anger is starting to build up in you, and you've got to recognize probably why it is. And you need to process that eventually. Like, why is that? That's the thing. You can do all these short-term anger management techniques. That was one of my goals with this book. Is there's a bunch of books about short-term anger management, but ultimately you need to get to the root of it, or it's just going to keep popping up. It's like that weed that just, you whack it down and it just pops back up, and you're like, no, you got to uproot that thing.
Right.
So there's the management techniques to help you learn to manage it, but then long-term goal is we want to eradicate it as best as we can by recognizing the roots of it. But that only comes with first learning how to respond correctly, slowing down, taking a breath. Did you know physically, actually, if you actually breathe correctly through your nose, breathing in for about 4 seconds through your nose and out through about 6 seconds, your body physically can't get stressed. It's the weirdest thing. Your body's created to breathe through your nose and out like that. And when you actually do that, it can actually calm you down and get you thinking straight if you'll take the time to slow down and do it.
So it's a physiological thing that you're saying. You breathe in through your nose 4 times and out your mouth 4 seconds. Okay.
Yeah. You breathe in for about, so you go, and then about 6 seconds out. But most of the time we're taking really short breaths. And you're breathing correctly when your belly rises rather than your chest rises. Boy, we're getting really into the counseling stuff here.
No, I'm digging it, man.
Yeah,
I'm digging it. I don't know if y'all see it. Well, you guys can't see it or listen to the podcast, but we're on video here, and I'm watching him do this, so I'm practicing this with him. This is good stuff.
So you know you're breathing correctly when your belly rises rather than your chest. If you're breathing from your chest, it's just going to create more anxiety and stress in you. That's where your body goes when it gets angry. It's like you're breathing the fast breathing.
Right.
When you're breathing from the belly breathing, the deep breathing, that's what helps calm you down. And it's crazy how the Lord made it that way. What I think is fascinating is you got to do it through your nostrils to really get the effect. And it's interesting that when God created man, it said he breathed into his nostrils. There's something spiritual happening there.
Man, that's some deep stuff here, man. That's actually really good. I never thought about that. And that's kind of the idea of taking yourself away from the situation. Because when you're away from a lot of stress, traffic, and things like that, think of vacation. You're automatically more relaxed. You're taking yourself away from that noise or distraction. That's what you're doing. All right, Men Unplugged, as we get ready to close out this episode here in the next 3 minutes, I want to remind you that you can get a copy of Joelle's book when you visit the show notes of this episode. All you do is visit the Men Unplugged site at menunplugged.net and type Joelle, that's Joel, in the search bar to get that link and the full show notes for this episode. So with that said, brother, let's wrap up today's interview with your final parting tip of wisdom and this other link that you have to your website so that they can get your book.
Yeah, so you can get more information at loveslowsdown.com. It's actually a really great book for small groups I've found. And so you can get it for your small group. It's divided into 6 sections, so you can do it over 6 weeks. In terms of the last tip of advice, I would say this is don't waste your anger, okay? I think a lot of times we get angry and then we're like, oh, I'm just going to let it go. Whenever anger or fear or anxiety shows up, it's all connected. I would encourage you, look a little bit deeper because there's something God wants to show you through what consistently makes you angry, through what consistently makes you anxious. And when you start to turn it around and you use it as a force to reveal areas of your life you haven't surrendered to God, all of a sudden you're using your anger for good. You're using your anxiety for good. Those negative emotions that you think, surely those could never be used for good. Wrong. God wants to turn all things around for his glory. It's just, how are you going to use it? So don't be afraid of anger. Don't be afraid of anxiety. Control, direct them, keep them under control, put them in the right place, but always use them as something that points back to where you're looking for your security, connection, or control from somewhere other than the source, which is God's love.
Great parting tip of wisdom, brother. Joelle, thanks again for being a guest on the show. Man, you rock the mic, brother.
Thanks.
All right, that wraps up today's show. To get Joelle's book and the full show notes for this episode, simply visit menunplugged.net. And when you're there, just type Joel in the search bar. And for the pre-order copy of my new book, Cut Through the Noise, visit menunplugged.net/noise. And lastly, for the full audiobook version of Faith Without Fear, visit faithwithoutfearbook.com. Until next time, stay plugged in and recharged. God bless.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. There's plenty more to see at menunplugged.net, including key resources and ways to engage with Jeff in his training and speaking forums. While there, don't forget to subscribe and receive a free gift. We look forward to you joining us next time here on the Men Unplugged Show.